The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and fear. The lights above flickered as though they too were unsure whether to stay awake for what was about to happen. Nurses moved quickly, their shoes squeaking against the polished floor, their faces tight with urgency. Somewhere behind a set of double doors, a woman screamed in pain, her voice raw, cracked, and breaking. That woman was Amara. Her body trembled violently on the narrow hospital bed as contractions tore through her like waves crashing against fragile cliffs. Sweat drenched her face, her hair clung to her temples, and her fingers clawed at the sheets as if she could anchor herself to the earth and keep from shattering. Her breathing came in desperate gasps, each one fighting to stay alive. And yet, the pain in her body was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Standing a few feet away from her bed was her husband, Daniel. He wasn't holding her hand. He wasn't whispering words of comfort. He wasn't even looking at her the way a husband should look at the woman carrying his child. Instead, his arms were crossed tightly over his chest, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold and impatient, as though he were waiting for a transaction to end, not a life to begin. On the small hospital table beside him lay a brown envelope. Inside it were divorce papers. "Sign it," Daniel said flatly, his voice cutting through her cries like a blade. Amara's eyes snapped open, disbelief flooding her tear-soaked face. "Daniel, I'm in labor," she whispered hoarsely. "Please, not now." He scoffed. "You've been in labor for hours, and I've been patient long enough." Another contraction ripped through her, and she screamed, her body arching as the pain consumed her. The nurse rushed forward, urging Daniel to step back, but he waved her away angrily. "I want this done now," he snapped, "before that child is born." Amara shook her head weakly, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "Why are you doing this?" she cried. "What did I do to deserve this?" Daniel's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You exist. That's what you did." Yet her chest tightened as if her heart were being crushed in an invisible fist. For years, she had endured his insults, his neglect, his humiliation. She had stayed silent through the nights he came home smelling of another woman's perfume. She had swallowed her pride when his mother called her useless, barren, worthless. She had forgiven him every time he reminded her that without him, she was nothing. And now, at her weakest moment, he had chosen to destroy her completely. "I'm tired of pretending," Daniel continued coldly. "Tired of carrying dead weight. Tired of a wife who brings nothing to the table. I've found someone better, someone who knows her place, someone with value." Another wave of pain hit her, and Amara screamed again, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please," she begged. "Just let me give birth first. Please." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Sign the papers, Amara, or I walk out of this hospital and you raise that child alone, with nothing." Her hands shook violently as he shoved the pen into her trembling fingers. The divorce papers slid onto the bed, mocking her with their neat lines and cold legal language. Her vision blurred, not just from tears, but from the crushing realization that the man she had loved had never loved her back. What Daniel didn't know, what no one in that hospital knew, was that Amara was not powerless. She was not poor. She was not nothing. She was a secret billionaire. And the moment she signed those papers, Daniel signed his own downfall. Years earlier, long before she ever met Daniel, Amara had been born into quiet wealth. Her father was a reclusive investor who believed in invisibility as protection. "The loudest wealth attracts the quickest destruction," he used to say. From a young age, Amara was taught to blend in, to never flaunt, to never reveal what others could exploit. When her parents died in a tragic accident, the fortune they left behind was placed in trusts, companies, and accounts under layers of legal protection so deep that even Amara's closest friends had no idea. She chose a simple life. She chose love over luxury. She chose Daniel. At first, he had seemed kind, charming, ambitious. He admired her humility, or so she thought. But once they married, his mask began to crack. He mocked her clothes, her quiet nature, her refusal to spend extravagantly. He accused her of lacking ambition because she worked a modest job instead of flaunting wealth she never intended to reveal. Slowly, his love turned into resentment, and resentment turned into cruelty. Now, as Amara lay bleeding and broken, Daniel believed he was finally free of her. "Sign," he said again. With shaking hands, tears blinding her, Amara signed her name. The pen slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor. Daniel snatched the papers, scanned them quickly, and smiled in satisfaction. Good, he said. Now we're done. Without another glance, without waiting for the child's first cry, Daniel turned and walked out of the room. The door slammed shut behind him. At that moment, Amara screamed again, not just in pain, but in rage. Hours later, as dawn crept through the hospital windows, a baby girl was born. Her cry pierced the room, sharp and strong, defiant against the darkness that had tried to swallow her mother whole. Amara held her child to her chest, tears falling onto the baby's tiny face. She whispered softly, her voice trembling but resolute. "They think we lost," she murmured, "but they have no idea." Days passed. Daniel didn't return. He sent a message instead. "Don't contact me again. My lawyer will handle everything." Amara read the message in silence, her face expressionless. Then she smiled. It was slow, cold, calculated. Within weeks, the world Daniel thought he controlled began to unravel. The business loan he had been waiting on was suddenly denied. The promotion he had bragged about disappeared overnight. Accounts he thought were secure were frozen without explanation. Investors stopped answering his calls. Partners distanced themselves. At first, he blamed bad luck. Then panic set in. He had no idea that behind the scenes, companies he'd never heard of were quietly acquiring his debts, dissolving contracts, and tightening legal nooses around every financial decision he had ever made. All of them traced back to one name: Amara. From a private office high above the city, dressed in a tailored black suit, Amara signed documents calmly while her daughter slept in a nearby crib. Lawyers addressed her with respect. Bankers stood when she entered rooms. Men who would never have looked at her twice before now trembled at the sound of her voice. Daniel found out the truth on the worst day of his life. He stood in a courtroom, sweat dripping down his face as a judge read out charges, asset seizures, and lawsuits piling on top of each other. His lawyer whispered frantically, but Daniel barely heard him. Then the courtroom doors opened. Amara walked in, calm, elegant, unbreakable. Their eyes met. Daniel's face drained of color. What is this?" he stammered. Amara looked at him with chilling calm. "You forced me to sign divorce papers while I was in labor," she said evenly. "Now I'm signing the end of your illusions." His knees buckled. In that moment, Daniel understood the depth of his mistake. He had thought he was divorcing a helpless woman. Instead, he had declared war on a queen who had been silent by choice. The judge's gavel came down. The sound echoed like a final heartbeat. Daniel lost everything. His reputation, his wealth, his freedom. And the woman he once believed was nothing walked away with everything intact. Her dignity, her child, and a future built on power, not permission. Years later, people would whisper about the man who destroyed himself by underestimating his wife. And somewhere far from the noise, Amara would sit with her daughter watching the sunrise, knowing that silence, when chosen wisely, is the most dangerous weapon of all. Because some women don't fight loudly, they wait.